Hi, welcome to Two Cities Online. My name is Brenna and I'll be your host today. Happy Father's Day. Our mission is to inspire people to follow Jesus. 2 weeks ago, I gave my life to Jesus, and I want that for you. I know my home is heaven, and I want to see you there too. And here's my dad and our pastor, Micah Foster. Take it away, Dad.
Hey, welcome to Two Cities. My name is Micah, and that was my precious daughter. Thank you for allowing her to be our host today. Today, I'm going to be interviewing Paul Haugen, Tony Route, and Joe Marquez, and we're going to be talking about our experience as a father, our experience as sons, and what we hope to be for our kids, the example we hope to be for our kids, and what has changed in our relationship and our perception of God as Father by being fathers ourselves. And if Two Cities is your church, I want to encourage you to download our app and also begin to give. If you're not already giving regularly, you can do that by texting any amount to this number, or you can go to our app and give in our app very simply, or visit 2Cities.Church/give. Thank you so much for being a part of that. Now here is the interview. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us today. Happy Father's Day to all you fathers listening or watching out there. I've got some of my favorite fathers here today to talk about fatherhood with me, and I'll let them introduce themselves. My name's Micah. I'm the pastor of Two Cities and the host of this podcast. We are Two Cities, and I've got some friends with me, so I'll let them introduce themselves and tell you their best dad joke. So, Paul, I know you got one in the wings. You always got one in the wings. You kick us off. Tell us about your family, your life, and your best dad joke.
Well, hey, everybody. My name is Paul Haugen. I am a dad of 4 because I'm insane. So I have a lot of dad jokes, a real arsenal. But my oldest son is 7 now, and so so we shared jokes back and forth. And he always wants to tell me potty jokes, because that's what a 7-year-old boy does. And I had to tell him that poop jokes are not my favorite kind of joke, but they are a solid number 2.
There you go.
Tony, why don't you give us some context for your life?
Okay, hi, my name is Tony Route, and I am the father of 3 children. Me and Trish got married about 5 years ago now, so I have 2 stepchildren, and I have 1 son who's 30. And as far as dad jokes, I have so many that are just fire, but I was kind of going over it with Trish as far as one of the best ones. And I think one thing I laughed is we were talking about going to Florida to Disneyland, and the kids are like, I'm afraid of alligators in Florida. And Trish's uncle says, well, yeah, he goes, yeah, some of those places you go, they have alligators all over the place, and they just lay around all day long and do nothing. And so I looked at the kids and I say, you know why that is, right? And they're like, why? I said, because they're teenage alligators. I got the eye roll, but I got a good chuckle out of it, which is the most important thing.
That's the whole purpose, the eye roll. I succeeded. That's kind of what that tells you.
Yeah.
That's good. All right, Joe, hit us.
All right, so I'm Joe Marquez. I'm currently a husband to 1 wife, Molly, and the father to 2 girls, Ellery and Coletta. And I don't know if I have a dad joke, but I think the best dad jokes are ones that you just say off the cuff to kind of get a rise out of your kids, right? And so my daughters are asking me, they're like, Dad, what are we gonna do for Memorial Day? What are we gonna have to eat? And I look over at them playing, and I grabbed her Barbie doll and said, we're gonna have barbecue. And they're just like, no, you're not going to cook our Barbies. But so that was a situational dad joke that just recently came up.
That is awesome. I really appreciate that. My daughter would yell at me if I did that. She would definitely not be okay with that. But that's pretty awesome. So the next kind of segment here is the best or most embarrassing dad moment. This can be either when you were embarrassed or when you embarrassed a kid. So this could happen to you or happen to them. Now, I think it's part of every dad's mission in life is to embarrass their kids at some point, especially in those more awkward years or the years when they're more easily embarrassed when you do something in front of their kids. So this isn't from me, but this is something that my father-in-law used to do to my wife, he would roll up to pick her up from school or something, but he would lean back his chair all the way and he would put his hand all the way on the steering wheel and he'd pump the loudest rap music he could find and roll down the windows and then just be like, you ready to go, and pick her up from school that way. And, if you know my wife, that was incredibly embarrassing, yet he loved it. And I think that's the dream of every dad. How can I embarrass my kids? So any of you guys got one of those?
I coached Little League this year. I was kind of making it up as I went along. Bunch of 7-year-old boys and one 7-year-old girl, and trying to get them to play baseball is no easy task. So one day at practice, I decided, well, let's get the bats going and we'll do some batting practice, but we'll make it interesting. The person who hit it the farthest got to pick a teammate to have sing "I'm a Little Teapot" in front of the entire crowd, in front of the entire team. And I didn't really think that through, what would happen. I just sort of said it. And then as we got going, people were hitting and I was like, oh, there's real names on the line. And then the kid who hit it the farthest had picked my son, Jackson. And we're wrapping up practice. And now I'm like, oh no, I got to do this. And I can tell he is just like, don't you dare make me do this. And I had to quickly disco spin out of that one, but he was very angry, very upset. And I was like, I should probably approach this with a little bit more intentionality and think this through a little better. Otherwise, my kid's going to end up singing "I'm a Little Teapot."
So how did you disco out of that?
I just said that because it was actually, there were two losers, Jackson and another kid. And the other kid, I think, was game to do it, but Jackson not so much. So I said, they just have to do it in front of their family. And then just carried on and told them about snacks, and they were fine.
What about you guys? Tony, Joe, you got an embarrassing something?
My daughters are still a little bit too young for me to have to embarrass them. So I'll do something that embarrassed me. So, during the pandemic, I recently came into some hair. And so my daughters decided to do some hair styling to me. And so Coletta and Ellery were behind me and putting in bows and all these different things. And, I just had this wild looking hair and we were playing around, having a good time. And I totally forgot they had done my hair. And so I get up and I take the garbage out and I'm walking to the garbage through my neighborhood. And everybody's like, "Hey, Joe, looking good." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm working out." "Nice, Joe. Good hair." I'm like, "Yeah, I got hair now." And I reach up and I realized I still have all the bows and everything in my hair in front of everybody in my neighborhood. So that was pretty embarrassing.
Awesome. Tony, you got something?
I think one thing that comes to mind, I remember we one day in the summer, like in the middle of the pandemic, because the kids wanted to swim, we decided to rent an Airbnb. And so we had the whole house to ourselves in the swimming pool. But for some reason, our 13-year-old didn't want to stay there. So she says, like, I want to go home. And I said, well, we're all going to stay here. She goes, "Oh, that's fine. I can stay home by myself. I'm old enough." So we're like, oh, okay, sure. So about 8 o'clock, we're like, okay, I want to take her home. So I took her back to the house, and about 30 minutes later, we start getting texts like, "Hey, so what are you guys doing?" And so after a while, I'm kind of like, "Well, what do you want? Do you want us to come and get you?" "Yeah, I can come and get you." So I did, and I picked her up. And when I got here, every light in the house was on. The TVs were on, all the TVs were on, everything. And so later on, we were having a family get together one day, and she again started talking about how she could stay by herself. And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" I said, "You forgot when I left you home by yourself, and I get home and the house is lit up like a casino." With every light we had in the house. And that was a real humbling experience and somewhat embarrassing for her, just tell everybody.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Well, all right, let's turn a corner a little bit. Tell me about your favorite memory of your father or a father figure in your life, or how a father figure impacted your life.
My grandfather was a big impact on my life. He always said that you need to put in the work, put in the time, in order to make the best of yourself. And he always showed me that hard work and the truth always paid off. And my grandfather told me this story once. He was working at Gallo, and he had worked himself up from picking in the grape fields to being the in charge of everybody picking the grapes to being general manager of the largest Gallo plant in the world in Fresno. And he was sitting with Giulio Gallo in the big round table, and he was telling everybody how he wanted things to be done. And Gallo asked everybody at the table, "What do you think?" Everybody said, "Yes, yes, perfect." And my grandfather said, "That's not going to work. And I'm going to tell you why it's not going to work," and laid out every single thing. And Gallo asked everybody, "Do you think Bob is right?" And they're like, "No, no, no, no." He goes, "I do, because he's the only one telling me how it actually works, not just agreeing with me." And my grandfather said after that story, he goes, "That's why it's super important that you understand a leader is somebody who makes his own path, not follows everybody else." And he goes, you make sure that you create your own path, and don't let anybody stand in your way, or any obstacle stand in your way. And I've always taken that to heart. And I'm only where I am today because of him. And so it really, really, really just warms my heart whenever I think about him, because he changed my life.
That's awesome.
My parents were both in the Army for 20 plus years, but they're very different. They were, very different. My mom passed away a couple years ago, but she was a talker. She would, like, everywhere we went, we would, she's running into someone she knows, and like we're always like waiting by the car, waiting for mom to come. But my dad was always this very, like quiet, stoic Norwegian guy. When I think about who I want to be, sometimes I wish that I could be the guy that sits quietly in the coffee house and is introspective and doesn't just blurt out whatever is on his head. But that's not who I am. But that's who my dad is. He's that guy. So always wanted to be like that. But every once in a while, we'd be sitting at dinner and someone would say something, and he would just fire off this like dagger of a one-liner that was just hilarious. And I remember when I was, I think 10 or 12 was the first time that we started, like playing off of each other. And so from then on, like that was the most my dad ever really said, was when we were just firing, jokes and puns or whatever, just that quick, very quick sense of humor that I got from my dad. So that's just what I think of when I think of him.
I don't think we would have as much entertainment in our lives if you were stoic or didn't say what was on your mind. Tony, you got anything?
My dad wasn't really in my life until I was 13 years old. But by the grace of God, I had a lot of individuals that really went above and beyond to kind of be a father figure in my life. One guy I think of in particular was a gentleman by the name of Jerry Pollard from my church when I was growing up. Of course, I wasn't his son, but when I would play football, he would come out to every practice, and I'd see him up there in the stands and so forth. He was more concerned with teaching me the principles about how to be a good man and how to have a sense of accountability. As a young teenager, acne was a big thing, and he introduced me to Noxema and how to clean my skin and all of this stuff, and just different little hygiene things and so forth. And it's funny, you don't appreciate that at the time, but now being a father myself and seeing what an example it is to take the time for whether somebody's your biological blood or not, but to take the time to try and be that godly figure. It's still something that affects me today and inspires me to want to not only do that for my own kids, but any young, impressionable children that I come across, in my job dealing with public service, but to try and be a benefit and a blessing in their lives. So that's one thing that really impacted me and still does.
Absolutely. For me, I had an active father in my life, and I'm so glad that there are so many men out there who are taking on that role for other people, who don't have that active father. It's such an honor when you get to be that for somebody. But my dad had his own business, And so I saw him work really, really hard. I saw the ups and downs of business. I saw trying to continue to provide for the family and make sure we had what we had. But that meant he was very busy too. And so sometimes he would have to kind of say, hey, not right now, son. I have to get this done. I've got this bid on this project. He was in construction. I didn't quite get that as a kid, but he did make me a promise that he would help me build a fort when he had the time. And so one weekend we went down to, can't remember what it was, Home Depot or something. We got all the materials and he made this incredible fort in our backyard that had electricity and bunk beds and a trap door, and it was on stilts and it had windows and siding, and it was incredible. So I always knew that even if he couldn't spend as much time with me as I had liked, he wanted to, and he was working hard for our family, and I loved that. I loved that fort. So I think just when we invest in some time with a kid, and when we make it special, that can go so far and show so much value. Even it can't be all the time. So that's what I remember. One of the things I remember from my dad. Of course, there's been other people who have invested in my life as well, but that's one way that he really impacted me. So tell me this, what would you say to someone who, by very nature, as I just mentioned, has that kind of influence on someone or someone else, a dad, a grandfather, a coach, a teacher, a mentor, and even moms too, where there maybe is not a father figure around and they're kind of filling those roles as well in the same kind of way. What would you say to someone like that? What would be your encouragement or your charge to them? What would be your motivational moment for that person?
I don't know if I have a motivational moment or words of wisdom for them, but like just as I've been like coaching sports or seeing my kids grow up, I think there's always a point in all of our lives where you sort of have to have an open hand when it comes to your kids and understand that other people playing a role in their life can be a good thing, and you have to try and steer them in the right direction a little bit. But what I love is this idea that we can all sort of be this community. You know, that old saying, it takes a village to raise a child, is, I don't know if it's completely accurate, but I definitely think I know there were people in my life that were outside of my parents that shaped me and helped me grow. And I would like to think I'm taking on that role for other kids through coaching and my kids' friends. And then I need other people to do that same thing for my kids, whether it's a teacher or a coach or a youth group leader or whatever it is, right? I don't know that there's an exhortation, just sort of like a, hey, let's all be in this together. Tony's stepdaughters are my nieces, and so I get to send my daughters over to Tony's house for sleepovers, and he sends his stepkids over to my house sleepovers. And so we play this role in each other's kids' lives. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Parenting a lot of times can feel isolated. It can feel lonely. But if we're parenting as a community, all of a sudden that's more impactful and it's better.
For myself, one thing that I constantly think about, and I think I've mentioned this to you before, Micah, was Mordecai Ham. And many people don't know who that person is, but he was a preacher. One day he held a revival in a small town, and there was a young man who came forward and accepted the Lord. And, and I'm sure it was an ordinary day for this gentleman. He probably didn't know what a difference he made that night. But that man was Billy Graham. And from that moment, just Mordecai Ham being faithful to what the Lord put on his heart that night, he's affected the lives of hundreds of millions of people throughout the world. I try to always remind myself, and I would encourage others to just be aware, you never know what God is doing, what seed he's planting, and things that we think don't matter at all to this night. You never know what a difference that you're making. It's funny, a lot of times you think you might say something and, you might think, well, I gave much better advice in my life, but that one thing you'll say to somebody and they will hold on to it for years to come. Yep. And that's good and bad, because like I said, I'm sitting here talking to you about Jerry Pollard, and I don't even know where he is today. And that was over, almost 40 years ago. Here I'm still talking about this guy and what an impact he made on my life. I know it may seem like you're not making a difference, but you never know what you're doing in somebody's life and what you're doing for the kingdom.
Yeah, and Tony, playing off that, when I was in the classroom, when we would have back to school night and parents would come in and meet me, I would always tell them, I said, I am so honored that you are allowing your, precious son, your precious daughter, people you love so much, to come into this classroom and allow me to teach them. I go, that is a great honor. And I take that with a huge onus to not only be the best teacher that I can, but also be the best role model for your students. Yeah. And I would tell them, I may not be the perfect teacher, but I'm going to do my best to make sure that your students know their talents and use their talents along the way. And because of that, that really opened up to how I approached my classroom, right? If a student was really good at making videos, I would let them turn in assignments as a video. If they were really good at art, I'd let them turn in assignments through an artistic window. The idea was I wanted the students to know that what they are passionate about is meaningful and that makes them special. I think people should know that if you are in the position to be that role model, that not only do you have something to teach these kids, but they can teach you something as well. They can teach you something new, and they can really give back to your life just as much as you're giving them. And Tony, just like you said, you don't know the impact you're making. As a teacher, you don't know the impact you're making because no kid really says, hey, I'm having a great time, right? But when you hear the stories years later, when you see one of your fellow students coming back from college and saying, I'm in science now because of you, or that I still remember the ice cream lab we did, Mr. Marquez, way back 10 years ago. That really means that you made an impact. You made a difference in one way or another. And I miss the classroom because of that. I miss it so much because I think I did my best work as that teacher.
You were teaching science, right? Is that right?
Yeah, 8th grade science.
So you're teaching science, but you're letting them do all these other ways to inform their education. That's great. I think for me, one of the things I can point to was as a specific time where someone said something to me that made an impact was a senior in high school. I was in choir, and we had gone to a trip to New York, and we were in this workshop with these composers and directors, and we just got finished singing a piece, and the composer and director that was one of the judges of the contest was helping us before the performance, helping us work through things, trying to get us better. Right after the song is done, he looks dead at me and he goes, "You're a beautiful man." And I was like kind of thrown off as an 18-year-old, this 60-year-old guy, he's like a grandpa, 60-something-year-old guy. His name was Weston Noble. And he looked at me and he said, "You're a beautiful man." First of all, it was the first time anyone acknowledged me as a man, not a boy. And the first time it wouldn't feel strange for a man to call me beautiful. And so it was like an affirming thing. And I don't really know what he meant by that. But for some reason in that moment, it made an impact. And just that positive affirmation made a big difference for me in that moment. How has being a dad impacted? Because for me, it changed things. How's being a dad impacted your view and or relationship with your heavenly Father?
I wake up every day excited to hug my girls. I can't wait for them to be awake and for me to tell them how much I love them. It's changed me because for the longest time, there was an idea of what I thought a man was supposed to be, this tough, strong, nothing affects him kind of thing. And with my girls, I just melt. At any moment I could cry because I love them so much. That's the way that it's affected me is you never know love until you're staring at your kids. And I just want to make sure that they know every day how much I love them. And I thank the Lord every day for gifting me with 2 beautiful girls. Just changed my life.
For me, it has made me so much more appreciative of God's grace towards me. As a father, you have lots of things that you could probably get upset with. Sometimes, especially you have a hard day at work and then you come home and maybe something's not done or maybe there's dishes or whatever, and you want to be upset. But I'm constantly reminded of how gracious our Heavenly Father is to me and how patient He has been over my 48 years. And I try to represent that in my own relationship with the kids, to be gracious, to be loving, always, unconditionally. It goes both ways. Number one, it's something that definitely convicts me, and I try to show that as well. But it also, I try to, in addition to show it, I'm also appreciative even more of how gracious God is to me and to them, and how he is constantly there with open arms to, like he says, I know the plans that I have for you, plans to prosper you, and to give you a hope and a future. And that's the same thing I want for the kids. And so I can see that relationship exemplified in my own actions. It'll blow you away when you really sit there and you just think about it. You're just like, praise God. It's just, and you try to exemplify and glorify him.
I think there are a lot of areas in my life where I don't know, I think I'm pretty good, and probably to my detriment, where I'm like, yeah, I got this handled. Fatherhood is not one of those areas. I am keenly aware of my shortcomings as a dad, and I'm just like there. I talked to my wife Jen about this. There are times where I'm just like, man, I'm blowing this, or like I see my kids going down the same path that I went on, which I turned out okay. But like you see these things happening, and you're like, oh no, I'm ruining everything. Like I'm blowing this, or I handled that wrong, or whatever. And so, I think to Tony's point, like I really learned about and fell in love with the idea of grace when I was 21 years old, understanding that there was nothing that I could do that would make God love me any less, and nothing I could do that would make God love me any more. That has been sort of a foundational thing in my life. But as a dad, if you feel like, oh man, I'm missing here, or I'm coming up short, or I wish I would have done that. That's when grace really hits home. When you feel like you're not equipped, or you're inadequate for the task, to know that I am still his, that he is still mine, that he's going to continue to be faithful and continue to bridge the gap is pretty overwhelming. To know that God loves me, not just like gives me, a job and gives me talents, but God loves me that like so much that he's going to cover my flaws and inadequacies as it relates to these 4 kids, and still care for them more than I even do, which is hard to believe. So I think the idea of grace just hits home 1,000 times more once you have kids.
I think for me, after my firstborn, I had a different appreciation for God as Father than I did before, because suddenly I was an actual father. And so I had all of these emotions, and this is a piece of me, this kid has like me in him, like he's me. And a lot of people still call him my mini me, Josiah. So that was a huge thing. And then having a daughter changed it more again. And then having an adopted son changed it again for me. And so it's like every time we come into a new kind of friendship or relationship, it does change our perceptions, or it deepens and widens our understanding of God and how much he loves us and how unfathomable it is. And the ever expanding grace that he offers us is incredible. One of the verses that I'm trying to utilize as a grounding for fatherhood is from 1 Corinthians 11, verse 1. This is Paul after he's talked about the freedoms we have in Christ. And at the very end of that, he says, follow my example as I follow the example of Christ. And so one of my prayers is that I would live in such a way that I could actually say to my kids, hey, follow me. Because if you follow what I'm doing, you're going to be following what Christ wants you to do. I want us to be that authentic in our faith. And for me, that's one of the guiding principles for fathering. And I don't always hit that mark, but again, grace is there. But that's what I'm striving for, is to present an example to my kids that I can invite them to follow me as I follow Christ, and they can see their dad trying to do that. Do you guys have any guiding principles for your family life or fathering or anything like that you'd like to share?
Well, I mean, I grew up. I had two siblings, a brother and a sister, so we were a family of 5. But everyone was pretty isolated in my house. So like I became aware of it when I was a teenager, and I was kind of trying to figure out this whole Jesus thing. And I would walk in through the garage, and there would be my dad had a den that just was like wall to wall books and a TV in there, and he was often just like listening to music, or a lot of times like on a computer playing solitaire, right? And I would be like, "Hey, Dad, how's it going?" And then I would walk through the house, and I'd go up to my room, and I'd pass at the top of the stairs was my parents' room, and I would look in, and my mom would be sitting there on the computer playing solitaire. And then I'd go by my brother's room, and he was doing doing his own thing, and then my sister was off doing her own thing. So we were a family, but we were separated. Everyone was sort of on their own, and so I was like just kind of figuring stuff out on my own. And a few, 10, maybe 15 years ago, my wife went to a funeral, and she came back and she told this story that like this guy had passed away, who was in his 50s or 40s, and I never met him. I didn't know him, but he had 3 kids, and the 3 kids got up and told the story, and he always talked about the family as like we're a hand, right? And we can be each individual little finger, or we can be together as one unit, and we're stronger when we're a family. And so it was always like, are you a little jazz hand, or are you a fist? And that struck me so much, because that, like, my family operated like this growing up. And so I'm always talking to my kids about like, hey, when they're fighting, or when they're arguing, or when they're at each other's throats, or they're getting on each other's nerves, I'm like, okay, we have a choice now. We can operate this way and kind of go our own way as an open hand, each individual finger. And now, because we have 4 kids, someone inevitably adds another finger on there. I'm like, okay, well, the example breaks down, or we can be strong as a fist. And that's the choice that we have to make. And so that idea that we're better together, that we're stronger together, I think is super foundational for me, and hopefully for them.
For me, like, I can't remember a time that my father ever told me that he loved me. Like, I just don't ever remember it. He was solitudinal as well. He'd play a board game that's 2-person by himself, right? So I make it a point to leave no doubt in my daughter's minds every day that I love them. And I don't want them to ever think, question that I love them. And that's one of my guiding principles, is every day tell them that I love them, morning, noon, and night, so they have no doubt that their father loves them.
The one thing that I want the kids to always remember is I can't think of what scripture is, but whether you eat, drink, or whatever you do all to the glory of God. I mean, when you look in Ecclesiastes, how Solomon summed up all of his wisdom, and obey God and obey his commandments. And that's the one thing I talk to them about when you're in college, and you get exposed to all these other philosophies and way of thinking and everything. It's so easy to lose sight of what's the most important thing. And doing those things, I don't think that they could ever lead them wrong, no matter what comes ahead, whether it be good or bad. If you stick to that, God is faithful. And I would love them always to remember that and use that as a guiding principle.
Really want to thank you for spending some time on the podcast and the service today for Father's Day. Really appreciate you. Really appreciate who you are to your families and our community. And I can only pray that more and more fathers would actually think about how they're impacting their family and then act upon that, as you guys have demonstrated and talked about today. Any other last minute things you want to say to anyone, to your family, to your dad, to a grandfather, or community as a whole? Now's the time.
To my children, kids, I love you. You are my 4 most favorite people in the world. Now go clean your room.
Tony, I feel like you were saying something.
Yeah, for me, I just want to say that I am incredibly honored and blessed to be called father in any capacity. And I just pray that the Lord enables me, like Solomon prayed for wisdom. That's what I want, just the wisdom to be a sound head of the family, and to lead them right. And I'm incredibly humbled by the responsibility, just like Joe was saying with his students. I'm incredibly humbled and blessed. And although some days I might not show it as much as others, I love you all, and I give my life for you. And I'm just incredibly blessed and thankful to God for allowing me to be in this position.
And as always, good things come to those who wait. So, Yeah, I waited so long to meet a woman that I could love and care truly for. Waited long for my firstborn and secondborn, and that wait was well worth it. There's no rush. Live your life, live it for the Lord, and good things come in their due time.
And to my family, thank you so much for inspiring me, for putting up with me, for allowing me to make mistakes as a father, understanding I'm not perfect, but also understanding that I do love you. I'm doing my best, and I'm always trying to point you towards Jesus. It's well worth it. I love you. I'm so proud of you. Thank you. And as Tony was saying, and as Jesus says in John 15, that there's no greater love than that to lay down your life for your friends, and we would say for your family. Jesus demonstrated that for us, and certainly if we were ever put in that situation, we know for certain for our kids, we would lay down our life in a moment. We just love you so much. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. Appreciate you. God bless you. Have a happy Father's Day.
Thanks for being with us today for 2Cities Online. And all you dads out there, we hope you have a great day. And to my dad, I just want you to chill, get in the hammock, hang out. I won't ask for anything. Wait, what? What did you make me say? If you want to know more about a relationship with Jesus, just type in the comments below or send us a message and we'll get back to you. Hope you guys have a great week. And you'll see me on Instagram and our private Facebook group in just a few minutes. God bless. Bye.